Call to order the regular meeting of the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission, September the 26th. Pledge of Allegiance will be led this evening by Commissioner Shelley Hayes.
Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Chairperson Seals,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Kloss, Commissioner Hawkinson, Commissioner Hayes,
Present.
Commissioner Altamirano,
Present.
Commissioner Clower,
Here.
Commissioner Volkar,
Present.
Commissioner Brandeman. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 1A, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. Do we have any requests to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 1B, commission communications. Anyone have any arts, culture, historic preservation related conversations as it relates to the city of West Sacramento? All right. Presentations, item number 2, the Regional Trails Initiative update. Tracy, Michelle? Michael, so close.
It's spelled funny. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Tracy Michael. I'm the new business manager for the Parks and Recreation Department. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to share with you some information on the Regional Trails Initiative. This is an item that we took to Council earlier in the month, but we think it's a project that is going to add to the culture of the community and the region, and thought it would be worth sharing with this commission. So I just have a very brief presentation that kind of walks through the effort. When we went to Council earlier in the month, it was providing an update on the 2016 Strategic Plan action item regarding the Trails Initiative and the Parks Master Plan. And as part of that update, we did request that Council consider approving a request for proposals to launch the Trails piece, which is the Regional Trails Initiative. They did approve issuing the RFP. The RFP was made available on September 16th, Friday. And so I thought I'd walk you through the scope of that effort and the timeline, because I imagine we'll be coming back to you periodically to provide you updates once that effort gets moving. So as I mentioned, when we were in front of Council, we were sharing information about both the Parks Master Plan and the Trails Initiative piece. Typically, the Trails component is housed under the Parks Master Plan. It's also a component of our Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan. Our Parks Master Plan was adopted in 2003, and since then we've seen a lot of changes in the community. We have development and demographic changes that have really impacted both the demand and need for recreation. We've also seen the landscape change with all of our flood improvement projects are creating new opportunities for recreation that weren't necessarily envisioned in 2003. So all of these point to a real need to update the Parks Master Plan. And we are working on a funding strategy and a schedule to do that. But as we were working on that strategy, we actually came across some unique funding opportunities related to the Trails component. And so that led us to start further exploring these non-traditional opportunities, which I'll speak to in a minute about funding, and then move forward with the Trails piece now, and then incorporate that into the other efforts, both the Parks Master Plan effort, as well as any updates that take place to our Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan as new information becomes available.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
The Regional Trails Initiative and the Bike Pedestrian Master Plan, do those both fall under the Parks Master Plan for the general plan update?
No.
Okay.
Separate.
Great, thank you.
But we have, part of this effort is looking at trails as both a recreation component as well as a transit component. So the two can be coordinated. So when we look at the region, and they're local incentives certainly for moving forward with the Trails Initiative now, we do have projects underway that could incorporate trail features now. So the sooner we can get a plan in place, the the more opportunity we have to implement the trails pieces sooner rather than later. And there are some opportunities to leverage resources, especially when you broaden the scope a little bit regionally. We have a region that has amazing amenities. We've all of these riverfront bluffs and levees. We have an existing trail infrastructure. We have a development that promotes multimodal, multi-generational transit. We've got close proximity to some great features. Cindy Tuttle has referenced West Sacramento as being the urban gateway to the Delta on occasion, and that's very true. Also, centrally located to connect all of these features, not only the Delta, but we have major lakes, we have wildlife areas, we have flyways, we have agriculture and educational venues, and so we are really uniquely positioned here in the city to serve as a major connector to all of these features. And despite the fact that we have a community that supports trail development and we have all of these amazing features, we really don't have a regionally coordinated approach to our trail infrastructure. And so this effort could serve as both a local and a regional effort to help create that roadmap. It would involve developing a plan that would create a regional trail system that would link our recreation facilities with the natural environment, with all of our flood improvement projects that are taking place in the region, and also our existing transportation system. It also positions the city to seek outside funding sources that are transit-related and flood improvement-related, and even ecosystem-related funding. Right now, what's happening with the state is they're changing their strategy related to flood improvement projects, and they're looking at ways to create multi-benefit projects. So they are focusing on ways to integrate ecosystem restoration with flood improvement work, and they're also looking for ways to create what they've termed enriching experiences on or adjacent to a lot of levee improvements. So this effort can help position us to seek some of these more non-traditional funding sources for actual trail improvements. In fact, based on our staff's success in working for a number of years with the state and our regional flood management planning team, we've already been able to secure some funds, have them earmarked by the state to initiate this effort. So what we're proposing as part of the Regional Trails Initiative is that the City of West Sacramento would serve as the lead for the effort. We would pull together a working group of all of our partners, which I'll speak to in a minute, to develop the vision for the effort. It would also include putting together an inventory of all of our existing trail facilities, looking at where the gaps are, potential expansions could be, putting together a comprehensive set of regional trail system goals and recommendations, as well as looking at a plan for the long-term operation and maintenance of the trails. And it also supports the implementation of other efforts. And this slide just highlights some of the regional partners that we've reached out to that have efforts underway that somehow relate to or complement a regional trails program. And the Regional Trails Initiative can actually help implement some of these related efforts. So we've reached out to all of these groups, and we have received support from all of them to participate in the effort. And some have even offered to help find ways to fund portions of it. The request for proposals, which was launched a week ago, is intended to be funded through grants or other local, state, and regional funding sources as available. We have written the scope of work for the effort to be implemented in phases as needed based on funding availability, but it's a really important process for us to complete now, because what it does is it helps us collect valuable information so that we can go out and compete for other sources of funding. It helps us to refine the scope of work and put together a cost estimate for completing the work, which is really critical to a lot of grant applications that are either available now or soon to be made available. Helps us to line up a qualified development team to work on the project, and it just helps us get that much closer to moving forward and developing the plan so that we can try to implement with other complementary projects as they move forward.
Tracy, quick question. When does the RFP close? How much time?
October 21st.
21st.
Tracy, one more question.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned using local funds to help, what pot would that come out of?
Well, we are looking at ways that we can use the flood funding to help leverage any opportunities for trail improvements, like securing the easements while we're moving forward.
West Africa would,
And right now, we have state funding that's been earmarked, but we are looking for other opportunities with even SAFCA and West SAFCA. And there might be some transit funds right now.
but they wouldn't be general funds or parks
Not at this point.
funds.
We're going to try to secure as much grant funding as we can to move forward.
Great.
What we did do is, a similar question came up when we presented this to council. And so what we committed to doing was in December, when we think we'll have our evaluation process complete, and we'll have a better understanding of what the costs are and which phases we think we can move forward with based on the funding that we think is available now, we would come back to council with a funding strategy so that they could see how we've lined up resources and plan to use them for the
Great,
effort.
thank you.
And so this slide just highlights the schedule. As I mentioned, we launched the RFP last week. We have an informational meeting coming up this Friday, and then proposals are due October 21st. We hope to have the evaluation process done in November and then get back in front of council in December. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions?
That's great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Consent agenda, approval of the minutes of the June 20th special meeting and the minutes of the July 18th special joint meeting with Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission. Commissioners have any changes or amendments that need to be made to the noted minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
So item number 3, we have a motion on the floor moved by Commissioner, I'll find it here, Volker, and seconded by Commissioner Hawkinson, so close again.
So close. Haagen-Dazs.
Hawkinson. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposition?
I just abstained on the June meeting since I wasn't here, but July 18th meeting is good for me. Thank
Great.
you.
Motion carries. Item number 4, consideration of the art concept. So I have a point of order. This, item number 4, great, gotcha. I'm here. Never mind. Item number 4, regular agenda, consideration of the art concept for streetscape improvements in Washington, in the Washington District. We have one request to speak, Don Schatzel, representing the West Sacramento Historical Society.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen. First, we, as a society, we appreciate Tracy sending over a copy of the staff report. Tracy? No. I'm nervous already. Your staff sending over the staff report.
Katie.
Sorry, Katie.
Katie.
Katie, I'm sorry. Katie, I'm sorry. And we are working together to try to meet with her at her request, and we're trying to put the schedule together so the Historical Society Board could at least meet with her and talk about her ideas and concepts. We have a couple of suggestions here prior to the actual staff report that was input from our own board, which is to try to encourage California history and Native American history that's consistent with the community of West Sacramento in this particular neighborhood. If those ingredients could somehow be included, and I'm sure we have pictures in our files and stuff in the Historical Society that we could share with your staff, and we're looking forward to get together to be able to do that. And finally, one of the things that jumped out at us in the picture that is in your staff report, we recognize in the Historical Society that we have what we consider to be a lot of emotionally historic property and sites. It's not recognized by the country, it's not a federal thing, it's not recognized by the state, but it's been in town for 50 years, for 70 years. 2 or 3 generations of people have grown up with it, so we consider it to be emotionally historic. So we've been looking for ways to try to recognize it and preserve it. And one of the ideas we found in Berkeley is mentioned here in your picture, where they actually engrave in the sidewalk poetry in Berkeley. And we were thinking maybe the same thing could happen here with respect to a house or a building. In Pacific Grove, they have gold plates on the houses with a number and the name of the house, and then you go to their gallery and you go to their museum, and it tells you about the history of the house with pictures over time. So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. We haven't made any decisions at the Historical Society and to recommend to the commission or the property owner, because we don't want to be in conflict with the property owner. We want to work with them. So we were intrigued by your picture. It's one of the ideas we were talking about was in your picture. So we like it. We support the proposal. We look forward to working with you and your staff, and thanks for the opportunity to address the
Thank you.
commission.
Nice to see you, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Katie Jacobson.
Good evening, Chair, Commission members. Tonight, staff is seeking Commission direction with regard to an art proposal for E Street to be incorporated into the Washington Infrastructure Project improvements, that it will be funded by state cap and trade funds, and those improvements are scheduled to begin construction next summer. As the Commission is aware, the Washington Realized document is a HUD Sustainable Community Strategy. It was approved by Council in February of 2015 and includes an art master plan, which was previously reviewed by your Commission, that addresses the important role of art in regeneration of the Washington District. The plan is to create small urban parks linked together through walkable garden streets that lead to the Riverwalk. The objective of the art and the enhanced landscaping proposed or designated for E Street and C Street is to reinforce wayfinding to the Riverwalk and to create visually connected art experiences that lead to the river. The city's received 2 grants based on the Washington Realized document, an NEA grant that we received in July of 2015, which your commission reviewed at your last meeting, and this Affordable Housing and Sustainable Community Grant in June of 2015 to install the first phase of infrastructure, including new frontage on E Street. So this is an aerial of E Street with the improvements overlay. Investments into E Street are intended to communicate the council's vision of this neighborhood, the council's vision for the future of the neighborhood. And the project team therefore evaluated our art concepts for E Street, given that we have an $80,000 budget that's programmed into the state cap and trade funds. We have a very tight design schedule, and we have very challenging built constraints in these 2 blocks. The location of the structures in relationship to the right-of-way, and given that we need to install new historic streetlights, gives us a very narrow area to work in. The art also needs to be visible for 2 blocks in order to create that connection, and so the team spent a lot of time out walking the blocks and walking the site and trying to assess what is the scale of the pieces that we would need to actually achieve that objective. And that we thought about the budget issues and the schedule issues that we need to address as well. And so we also thought and played with the idea of if we didn't have the budget to do an acquisition of 2 large pieces, could we maybe just do 1 large piece? So we began to look at locations for that. And we looked at the corner of 3rd and E Street. So we looked at the north side of that, and the north side of the intersection is very cluttered with a lot of signals and utility boxes and overgrown areas, and we felt like, again, given the scale of the piece we could afford, that we couldn't locate it there. Then we looked at the southern corner, and we felt like that anything that we placed on that corner would just read as part of the commercial development that's CalSTRS. So we researched ideas and with various individuals about what we could do in terms of an art treatment on this street. And what staff is proposing is that we do a text-based art. We feel that it could be a strong it could meet our objective, it could be a strong option for the city. Language as a visual arts medium has emerged relatively recently, and it's in a new genre. It's considered text-based art. And artists working in this genre have begun to use words as an artistic medium to provoke emotion or conversation or just thinking. And one of the examples that I pulled is the courthouse, the federal courthouse in Sacramento, where the artist Jenny Holzer, she took historic sayings having to do with justice and politics and just quotes of famous individuals or just things that were embedded in our culture and history. And she inscribed them into these paver stones, and then she set them like randomly throughout the plaza in different directions so that pedestrians would encounter them whatever direction they were coming from. They would encounter some of them. Another example that I found was in Columbus, Ohio. An artist there did a crowdsourced story about their city, and she took a very tall building, and then she started the first line of it, and then she had individuals enter the next phrase of the story, and she just kept adding to it over time using this crowdsourcing method. And that was a temporary piece, but it was very important to the community and considered very impactful. So we thought about this, and we thought about how could we possibly use this to encourage or draw pedestrians, which is part of our objective with this piece, and create sort of like an element of discovery. And we also thought about the fact that it's a residential neighborhood, so we needed something to be of an intimate scale that would fit in a residential neighborhood and work in that context. So what we're proposing is a poem that would be inscribed into paver stones that would be run the length, a 2-block length from 3rd Street to 5th Street. And so pedestrians, in order to read the poem, would be drawn down that 2-block length towards the river. And at the entry of it, we would put like a monument that would be not huge, but a monument that would be of a historic aesthetic that would just have the name of the poem and the author of the poem. And then we would propose that the process would be that we would set a maximum word count, and we would do an RFP and advertise for a poet, and we would pay, say, $5,000 to that poet, and the poem would be anything about a river. And then we would convene a panel and do a selection of the poem. And as soon as we had completed that, we would make sure that we have a graphic artist retained to work with the poet. So if the poet wants to have certain spacing or emphasize certain words, or the poet wants a certain font that is part of what they're communicating, the graphic artist on our construction or design team and the poet would work together to do that. So this is just another graphic that sort of gives you all the pieces that the team is proposing with regard to this art concept. So essentially, the $80,000, a lot of that then can go into the materials. Some of it would go a little bit, a few $1,000s to the graphic artist, and then $5,000 to the poet. The rest of it would actually go into the materials. So essentially, the poem font, and it creates an art element within the frontage. So that concludes my proposal, my presentation, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Katie. Commissioners, questions?
I have one. Katie, this looks like a lot of real estate in these pictures that's going to be taken over to implement this process? Like
No,
from
this is existing it's existing frontage that the city owns.
Okay, and this is kind of what it's going to look like with the
Well-
wrought iron and,
Right, so E Street is designated, again, it has a special status. This E Street is supposed to be in the community, the Sustainable Community Strategy document Washington realized. It really designates that East Street has a special status. Ultimately, it's where the streetcar will go. And so we're supposed to communicate that through special design features. So we have been working with the design team to, and the historic context that we're in, to create these green areas where we could fill in canopy trees. And we are proposing now to do these very historic iron fences up, 1.5 feet high. So we're at the same time extremely aware of how tight the area is that we have to work with in terms of our design and the proximity of the homes. So we have a lot of outreach planned coming up in the future with those property owners. We already have been working with them for 2 years doing the HUD Sustainable Community Strategy. So we had a lot of one-on-one meetings with them. They've already seen and engaged and participated in the development of these cross-sections. I think a lot of them are just really excited to see this kind of thing happening in their neighborhood.
Katie, so then the 1.5 foot fencing that runs along the new pavers with the poem, the funding for that comes from the cap and trade?
Yes, it's part of our frontage improvement. We have these landscape strips and they have to be protected. So we wanted to do it in a historic way. And also there's a lot of really beautiful heritage oak trees, which we want to make sure to protect. But we also have some gaps where we need to plant a few
Right.
more.
And so then the taller, spiky fence, yeah, what's
Oh,
wrought
that's
iron?
just-
That's an artist's conception of
Yeah,
what
exactly,
is what the
that-
homeowner might choose to do with it.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Exactly. Now I understand where
we're going?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it would be up to the homeowner what kind of fence they want to have on their front. Many of them don't have any fencing, but if they
Right.
did, it's completely within, zoning a code, up to them what kind of fence they want to install. We would not be installing that fence. And we also, in working with the property owners, we're kind of, if someone really is opposing something, we can move a landscape strip to another, we're going to try to create as much of a collaborative environment as we can, given the constraints that we have.
And then so then is the intention that the plan for E Street would be the plan for C Street?
No, C Street has the same designation. It's a very important east-west connection to the Riverwalk, and it will also have art on it, and it's got the I Street Bridge replacement.
Right.
And so
Right,
it's
right.
very important, and it's carrying all modes. It has a major bike, ped, streetcar. So we would do a similar treatment, but we view this district as being more eclectic. It has these very historic areas, but we also are realistic that on these vacant parcels, more contemporary structures may come in. And we just really want to embrace the historic in our frontage treatments and our signs and benches and things like that.
But the design of the street monument or the obelisk might be the same. When we did the big Street.
Sense of place.
sense of place,
Signs.
finding that big Washington monument as you come into that area of town, the intention, at that point, the conversation and the intention was that then as smaller designations or wayfinding, that it would follow a theme based on that, so that we didn't just have like random street signs, random monument signs plopped all over the city depending on the whim of. So I'm wondering then, things like the font become part of the art and the design. Would that then become part of the theme for that neighborhood, for the district? Would it be, so that there was a continuity to it that moved you through it without which wouldn't have to be a constraint, because it'd be as simple as, what do our obelisks look like? What does the font look like? Can we continue this through?
There was a lot of discussion on the part of the team about that, and it was interesting because a lot of people on the design team felt like we should have some consistency, like you're advising. But I think I would have to take further action. I think I would have to get your commission and council to approve of any icons or font or anything that we wanted to standardize in the district. Right now, the Washington Sustainable Community Strategy basically says historic, try to reference historic, but it doesn't get into any detail standards.
And so, in a note to staff, that in the minute, as reflected in the minutes of the June 20th meeting, there was a request that this commission receive the most current iteration of the Washington Specific Plan and the Washington Sustainable Community Plan. And we did not, as far as I know, we did not receive that.
Oh.
The other thing that happened during that meeting is that I was appointed to represent this commission in conversations related to the river crossing and the NEA grant moving forward. But I didn't know at what point that was appropriate. Are you not to that point yet?
Unfortunately, Sacramento, because they're our partner, and that arena is really taking a lot of the Metropolitan Arts Commission director's time. And so I've kind of been pulsing her, and I hope to get going, but I've been standing by waiting for her to initiate.
So the meetings that you're talking about, the conversations that you're talking about, and the team that you refer to, is that an internal staff team?
Right.
Is that appropriate to have a commissioner participate? Would that help smooth the way moving forward with the Metropolitan Arts Commission, or?
I think, so the NEA grant and the Metro Arts Commission, that is a process that just hasn't started yet. But I think that through all the interviews, which you're going to be, a stakeholder, but then you could, for example, really say to the team, I really want you to interview these other people, or that's very open. I think this Washington infrastructure project is like an early implementation of the NEA grant, definitely. But we have a very difficult time frame to accomplish it, and so I just really need actions that can move this piece of it forward, or actions that say, let's not do this right now, let's wait until the NEA work is further along.
But this is NEA funding.
This funding is coming from state climate investment funds. It's
Oh, so this is
basically
cap and
infrastructure
trade.
funding.
Okay, all right. So this is not the NEA
No.
river crossing? I was confused, I'm sorry.
I mean,
Okay.
it is an early implementation of the concept of it, but it isn't funded, or it's not part of that process.
So in
right
this
now.
$80,000 budget for this work, is there a portion that's set aside for maintenance?
No, right now I'm participating with the finance department because we have a patchwork of different legal financing mechanisms in place right now in that district, and we want to basically get consistency, dissolve them, and put in place a maintenance CFD for lighting and landscaping and.
Because in the public art fund, some of that money is set aside for maintenance of the pieces, typically when we approve and they bring it forward. And so I'm just curious that in this, while it is its own neighborhood, it has a specific plan, nonetheless, it is still part of the city. And how that gets maintained, what happens to the cute 1.5 foot, well, although that's a different pot, but with this NEA funding or the funding for the public art piece, is there something built into it to help preserve it, to maintain it, to protect it?
State grant funds are only for capital. They can only be invested in a capital. You cannot skim any away for, well, that's not the right word. You cannot retain any for maintenance. So it all has to be invested in the capital improvements. But I think that the finance department and the council really is what wants us to get in place a CFD. Most areas have their own CFDs for maintenance, and it's usually it's common that it's half general fund, half a CFD. That's usually how it splits out. So we have, for example, the commercial developments have obligations for maintenance on them. I think including West Gateway Place, the new apartments. But then it's patchwork. So we really want to tackle the whole issue in that whole district that we need maintenance funds. There's no lights.
Right.
So we're going to have a PG&E bill, and I want to have irrigation on these canopy trees.
Right. Okay, a point, and then a concern that if maintenance of this 2 blocks, say, maybe not everybody is excited about the poetry as we are, and something happens there, maintenance of that. We have a dwindling public art fund right now. And so as we move forward and plan for, things or proposals, I just am curious, is that where, is that coming out of the public art fund? Is it coming, has there been a conversation around that? And so if we could hear back about that, that would be great.
Sure, I'll
Thanks,
try
Katie.
to have finance give you a report, but I do believe that the art fund is only for capital and could not be
For the state.
for this is, but the art, thought you were talking about that 0.5% set aside art fund that
Right.
the city has. I believe that can only be capital.
I thought it included maintenance in the budget.
Oh, does it?
Like when we did the
Well, I
park,
think,
when we did remember those salamanders that kept disappearing and we paid
Yeah,
for
but wasn't the artist responsible for?
the first year? So maybe it was based on individual project, I don't really
Yeah.
know.
I have one more question. Are both sides of the street going to be improved? Or is
Yes.
this project simply one side?
No, it's both sides. The graphic is fairly accurate as to the other side of the street.
Okay, are there any little fences over there, or is this just?
Yes, that they would
lawn?
have the same landscaping strips.
We're kind of hung up on the little fences.
I can't, do you
They're
like
so
the fences?
historic.
I do like the
I
fences.
do like
very
them.
much.
I'm worried for them. I'm
And I
worried
didn't
for
see
those
them
little
on the other
fences.
side of the street, so
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yes.
be.
I love
Yes,
the little fences. It reminds me of the fencing around the Crocker, the
Yeah.
old part of the Crocker. It's
Yeah.
great. Whether it's an accurate reflection of what was happening in that neighborhood, it certainly sets a tone. And I love I'm kind of worried about the little fences. I don't know what you're going to put them in, like 4 feet of cement
we are
below the little
putting,
fences?
we are going to, we've looked at other cities where they have them, and we are going to put them on a crown of cement, a few inches of cement, and then set them into that. And definitely, they're going to be on both sides of the street. It will try to, again, we have to work with the existing built conditions, but we're trying to make it symmetrical as possible.
And so then the historic lighting that you talked about, will that be throughout that neighborhood?
Yes.
So it won't just be a street? It'll be,
No,
unlike the font, there'll be a continuity about the
Yes.
lighting, okay?
Yes, so that, and everywhere that the project,
We
the,
did that
the
already.
capital project is installing lights, they will all be those historic lights. So the historic lights will actually begin at West Capitol as it enters there towards the Rayleigh's headquarters building. That's where, that will be the beginning. So I'm doing everything from that point in historic, so that it begins to communicate you're entering this new district.
And that
Nice.
is a lovely designation, yeah? Yeah, yeah.
Katie, I'm excited about this project. I really like this East Street project. But I can see myself walking 2 blocks and trying to catch, the next part of the poem. And before you know it, I got my steps in, hopefully. We'll see if I do it a couple of times. But I do echo the commissioner's worry about maintenance, because I do see it is a 2-block path, and so stuff can happen. So I think we do need to keep that in the back of our minds. How do we maintain and make sure that it's always nice and clean, and for people to be able to see it?
So your request of us is to receive this information, to receive feedback from us, and a summary of some of the things that I heard related to continuity with existing art, wayfinding public art pieces like the monolith outside of the firehouse, and concerns about feedback about maintenance, and feedback about interaction with the Historic Society, and as it relates to what might be considered historically appropriate amendments. And Shelley has something. Go ahead, Commissioner Hayes.
Well, yeah, and I also want to ask about the monument, because it looks like it's a pretty large-scale monument, and it's only going to have the name of the artist and the name of the poem. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration about using it to incorporate history of the area, of that neighborhood, or the riverfront. It kind of seems like a good place to add some historic perspective about the area into that Has that been considered, talked about at all?
No, we're just evolving this concept. We envision this to be like 4 feet high. We don't want it to be,
Right. Something that you would have to walk to see it.
right, we want people to say, what is this? And go look and, oh, it's a
Right.
poem, and then what's going on? And then be drawn, it'd be drawn down. But the idea that we could add additional information on the monument, I can certainly take that back to the team and council and.
Just the district name, maybe, just so that.
Which would be some continuity
the
with that,
place setting.
yeah, with that
Also,
place.
does
setting.
anybody call that Washington District or more Broderick, right? That's kind of a general term that's given to that neighborhood.
I think that Katie helped.
Plan.
I want to say that it's Washington officially.
Staff refers to it that way because it's a specific plan, Washington-specific
Because
plan
the
area.
plan was named Washington
Right,
Plan.
so that's sort of our bureaucrats speak about it.
Which is historically
there was-
accurate in
was it-
that was the name of that district. Yes.
There was, do you remember, you had talked about June 20th meeting, and there was a lady who lives in that historic district, Martha Mills, and she really encouraged there to be some art talking about David Broderick, the namesake of that neighborhood. And she also kind of said, when she was making her plea, that she does consider that whole neighborhood Broderick. And there was some point where it kind of went from Washington, its initial designation, I think, on maps, to more just being called Broderick. And that's definitely what I call the northern neighborhood where I'm at, the 50s development by Arteagas. But that neighborhood there, I think maybe people do just refer to as Broderick.
As Broderick. And
maybe
then
not
further
Washington.
north and east would be the historic Washington neighborhood.
monument
And I
is.
think that in the monument on the Riverwalk that refers to the salmon processing plant, I think it refers to that as the Washington neighborhood as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
and because we don't have a historic specific plan, but I think as you move in and north, it becomes Broderick and then Bright.
I also, now that I'm speaking, I wanted to further the thought that some history should be put into this area, and specifically where the poem is. I think I had never heard that this was just going to be some poem on the plaques on the sidewalk. And maybe what would be better would be historical information on those plaques, maybe about a house that one of them might be in front of, assuming that the resident would be okay with that, and then maybe other factoids about.
I would be happy to explore that for
Yeah.
another street. We have an objective that's established in that sustainable community strategy about what is the objective of this artwork on East Street.
It has to
But we
be.
have many other streets, and we certainly can add to, using this concept, we could do many other historical pieces in sidewalks or,
Sure.
throughout the district.
I'd just love to see more historical plaques, and I didn't know that the poem was 100%.
Well,
Confirmed.
the funding is river crossing, and so the challenge was to find some kind of public art that would relate to this is how you get to the river,
Right.
I think, which was part of that conversation we had.
All right.
Yeah. But I agree, more history is good.
I'd love to see
Right.
his history on those plaques instead
Sure.
of some pieces of a poem, but.
Yeah. But, maybe not on the plaques, but maybe somehow incorporated into the monument or other, some sort of interpretive,
Sure.
A
wayfinding.
challenge.
We have other opportunities to get.
Cool, like maybe on C Street, the equivalent kind of thing on C Street, maybe more history stuff there.
Commissioner Volker, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to offer a suggestion. So Davis has had success with the Poet Laureate program, and so I know that you're offering a $5,000 bid or offer for the poet, but they're using their Poet Laureate and using them for other events, civic engagement, using them for other city events, and so that might be a thought that we might be able to then use that person in other capacities as well, just beyond the scope of this project. And it-
Designated West Sacramento Poet Laureate.
And it's honorary in Davis, so I mean, if there's a funding associated with this, maybe you could use that. They use a 2-year term.
As long as we could find a poet in West Sac. Is the.
Sure, we can.
I think
Know
some of the,
anybody
just
Historical?
a little feedback from the standpoint of the plaques in the pavement, referring to a specific, and Mr. Schatzel brought it up as well, referring to a specific building that is privately held by someone who has every right to tear that building down. And so, you know, because none of them are preserved at this point officially with the state or, I don't think so, with the state or the federal designation, that could be a potential issue.
The last meeting, somebody said that's an on registry historic district between C and E and 3rd and 5th. Those 4 blocks are.
Are historically
historic
registered?
District.
They're not registered, they've been surveyed. It was work we did with the Historic Commission. We've surveyed it. It's all in that Washington Sustainable Community document. There's a description of each of those.
It would probably
properties.
be really helpful if we could get a copy of that.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
I will get.
And what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that there's some
It-
tax benefits to the residents?
Not yet, it's just noting for this, so the Washington Realized document that is the foundation to go forward and say, all of these policies have been, we've engaged the entire community and our electeds and commission members, and this is the policies that they want to go forward into a specific plan. So we've surveyed the homes and we described the policy intention of doing so, which is that, again, that in terms of the improvements that we're doing and things like that, there's been a dialogue going on with the Historic Society, with staff for a long time, but the specific plan will actually be the venue whereby it can be decided what type of zoning and other policies the community wants with regard to those historic blocks. So I would say that there's an intention, expressed policy intention, but will be worked out in the actual specific plan language as to, and I know the Historic Society's brought forth requests with regard to it. So that's really with the planning department, and I'm not that familiar, so I can't fully speak on it, but I can tell you that is the intention that will go forward and to be enacted in the specific plan in some manner.
And so prior to that being enacted in the specific plan, Connie, is it possible that we might be part of that conversation? Because it's been a conversation in this commission since its inception, as basic as we should have a walking tour of cool old buildings to now we're going to get a specific plan, and, you know, and Dean's point is well taken. It'd be great if we had an idea what was going on in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So.
We could just hire the clampers to put up a whole bunch of renegade plaques, like the one in front of the senator's garage. You familiar?
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's so many beautiful ways of honoring the history that can be done with all kinds of art expressions. So I think that everyone, you know, embraces that with regard to these efforts. But I need to bring them forward just, you know, one by one to you for approval. So I am requesting Chair, commission action to recommend to council that it approve this concept, or not, or to recommend not to approve the concept.
Taking into consideration some of the feedback that you got back from the
Right,
group.
and then I'll report that out to council, that you've asked for this additional information and that you want to make sure that these other things are addressed and back in front of you.
Okay.
Call for the vote.
Is there a motion?
So I motion that we recommend to the council approval of the East Street streetscape art project.
And I'll second.
So for item number 4, moved by Commissioner Altamirano and seconded by Commissioner Volker. Is there, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Is there, so the historical things we brought up, that could maybe, is there going to be any other, there may or may not be another statue there, or?
Well, we have so much art to install in that district that we just have so many opportunities. And so, for example, if you looked at the master plan graphic, you have art icons on Tower Bridge Gateway that lead between Tower Bridge and the Civic Center as part of the streetcar route. That's like
Yeah.
a front door, like entry arterial to our city. that would be cool. There's so many opportunities. I'm restricted by, funding and time, but with the development of the NEA work, that's where we're going to come forward and give you a very detailed plan. This is the objective of the art piece. This is what we're trying to, achieve with it. This is how we're going to fund it. This is when we think it's going to happen.
Okay. Okay, I'll eye that.
You'll eye that? Okay. Any opposition?
None.
Any abstention? So moved. Thank you, Commissioners. That was really interesting. And I will be a little more on track when we get the copy. Thanks, Don. When we get the copy of the
Yeah, the Washington Specific.
the Washington Specific Plan,
The
and
original one is online, but I'll go ahead and see if I can email you a copy as well.
that'd be great.
Maybe we want a workshop or something on that, just to go over it with whoever.
Let's talk about that when we get a little further down the agenda,
Okay.
because then there's a couple things around workshops that might be a
Okay.
good idea. Item number 5, Commission Calendar. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Katie?
The next regularly scheduled meeting of the,
Our next scheduled meeting is for December 5th.
Okay.
And that's all we have right now.
okay, and so in the December meeting, will we set the calendar for 2017?
Wasn't there an email about changing it to the 7th, or was that a year ago?
Let's see here on the 5th.
It couldn't be the 7th, because the Port Commission meets here at 5:15, and they may run over.
Oh, I don't know why I'm thinking of that.
No, it's possible that it was moved from the 12th to the 5th.
I think it was
previously.
moved up,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, we can go ahead and try to set the schedule at the next meeting.
Say that
Oh, so
again?
We can go ahead and try to set the calendar for next year at the.
And you'll have that
Just-
for us in the
yeah.
December meeting?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
go ahead and try to do that.
All right. Future items request.
So yes, I have one future item request. So I've been going to the barn a couple of times now, especially on Fridays, and I really enjoy it. And I know the city of West Sacramento has the ability to have 10 events a year at the barn. So I was wanting to see if we can propose having some cultural events there at the barn. Like for September is it's a Hispanic month, for example. We're celebrating Hispanic culture at my job, and other cultures, of course, too. But that just made me think, hey, I think the barn would be a great place to host a few cultural events for the community.
Okay, so we'll put that one on the next agenda and discuss that and talk about how we would maybe
Could we-
approach that and advertise that and put that out.
Connie brought it to us. Connie.
Yeah, Cindy.
Cindy brought us a request for input on those 10 days. So in December, it would be lovely if we could have an update.
Okay, perfect.
on-
That's what we'll
and
do.
then, maybe something moving
Up-
forward related
Mm-hmm.
to celebrate the
Events.
diversity in the community. right?
Yep.
Several cultures.
Yes, definitely.
Any other future item requests?
Workshop on historical.
So, an idea and a request, maybe 6 years ago, as we came into the new year, we had a planning session. We
Yeah.
selected a date. Bob Johnson coordinated it. Staff was involved, and we did a half-day. And we had opportunity, we have such an engaged and committed group of commissioners, which is delightful and not always been the case. And things are moving at lightning speed. So rather than us asking maybe that would be a great time to give us an update, well, we could talk about some things that we'd like to see. We did it prior to council's planning, so that there would be some input from us related to some things that we'd like to consider. So, or we'd like for council to consider some initiatives from the Arts Commission, areas that they might take a look at. And we worked with, I think we had 4
staff members.
4 staff members. It was a very engaged process, and it was really beneficial because it set a program of work and had everybody headed in the right direction. It doesn't have to be a half a day. I guess it could be
Couple hours?
couple hours, but it was, in the bigger picture, over the course of the next, 18 months, 2 terms of commissioners, it was really a very beneficial process. It just gave everybody a level playing field and created that in an unofficial capacity, right? But an opportunity for us to all sit down and to learn together.
That'd be great.
Sounds good. Not having our director here tonight, which she couldn't make it, I apologize, on her behalf. Something very urgent came up. Certainly, I'll go back and discuss that with her. I can probably pull the files, kind of look at what was done 6 years ago. I assume the public was invited with that many
The public
commissioners?
was invited, but the meeting was in the Gaden Room.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't here. It was in the Gaden Room. The public could have been there, but it was mainly we have really bright, really engaged commissioners, and yet, change in staff and change
Absolutely.
on the park side, and it just creates a level field for everyone so that it's not one person's institutional knowledge checking with another person's institutional knowledge, and, commissioners that I just think it's a good idea.
Okay.
And I don't know, commissioners, how do you feel about that? Could you
I
support
think
that?
that'd be great, definitely support
It's
it,
a
yes.
great idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should use the talent that sits on this commission, and it's broad. And the best place to start with that is to get everybody on the same page. That
It might be helpful to learn about upcoming, what's going to happen or what the city is bringing forward to us prior to
Some
getting
of
up
that-
against a deadline.
Right.
Just knowing that, and that's coming, and
Some of that, the timeline for that NEA grant, it'd be awesome to know what that is. We get things at kind of a last minute because it has to get done, but if we knew what the deadline was, or what timelines and requirements are for the grants,
we'd start asking questions earlier so that it came to us
Okay.
in kind of the shape that.
and it's in no way us setting policy. It's just taking full advantage of this really talented commission, I think.
Okay. So noted.
Any other future item requests? Thank you so much, Daniel, for sending us the council newsletter.
Yes.
That's really helpful, keeps us all on the same page. That was a new development this year, and you've done thank you for, I can't see you. I'm the short person,
There he
thank
is.
you. I'm talking to like your forehead. Thank you for your good work in getting us agendas on time and checking with us about dates.
Just taking care of us, letting us know
Yeah.
when the community event's happening, and
Yeah, it helps us to be really effective, so, thank you. Thank you so much. Anything else?
I'm good.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposition? Moved, seconded, approved, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.